Your retirement savings are in jeopardy. The banks and Wall Street firms are looking out only for themselves. The markets are confusing and treacherous to navigate without help. The number one financial question is, am I going to run out of money in retirement? Paul Merriman is here to help.
Imagine putting your head on the pillow at night without worrying about your bills.
Paul Merriman is an educator, award-winning podcaster, and best-selling author whose straightforward advice about retirement savings and managing money has been followed by tens of thousands of people.
You have the chance to double or even triple your returns over a lifetime. And the sooner you start, the better off you are.
Learn about his 5 life-changing choices to help you grow and manage your money in Financial Fitness After 50.
When you follow my plan, you will have more money with less risk. And best of all, more peace of mind.
Here's Paul Merriman.
Hi, I'm Paul Merriman, and I am going to, for the next few minutes, be talking about a very important subject. A subject you're going to like to hear about because I'm going to take you through 20 steps to double your income in retirement. I know that may sound too good to be true, but you stick around because I'm going to show you how to do it. I think actually it's pretty easy. Now, there are 2 groups of people who are probably watching this. Some of you are retired and you're living off of the money. So having a chance to double your money sounds like a pretty tall order, but it is absolutely possible. And others of you are accumulating for retirement, and the younger you are, the easier it is to actually accomplish this. And I believe that if you can just find some way to add 1% a year to your return, you, in fact, have a legitimate shot at doing that. In fact, just one sec, I want to grab a number here that's going to, I think, for some of you folks who are actually on the cusp of retiring or are retired, might find very interesting. When I look back over the last 40-some years here, I can see lots of periods where you would have done fantastic, other periods you would have struggled with some sort of a combination of stocks and bonds. But I noticed something here. If I have 20% of my money in the stock portion of the portfolio versus 30% of the money in the stock part of the portfolio, and I look over a period of 25 years, in fact, let me take it all the way down to the bottom of the page, over 40 years, give the market every opportunity to give you money or try to take it away, that with the 20% in equities, you ended up with about half the money you started with. Doesn't matter if you started with $1 million, you end up with 500,000. If you started with 500,000, you ended up with 250. But you ended up living off of that money, by the way, in this case, taking out 4% every year plus inflation. You lived on it and had a little bit left. If you just moved one column to the right, 10% more equities, you would have ended up with almost 4 times what you started with. 4 times. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because the difference in return was 0.6%. It wasn't even 1%. 0.6% difference in the return made a huge difference in your lifestyle and what you left to others. And the recommendations that I have to make for you in terms of how you should diversify your portfolio, and I'll share that in just a second, they can legitimately add 3 to 5% a year for many investors. Now, I see investors making what I call sins of omission and sins of commission. There are some things that we didn't do right, And then there are some things that we did, and they were wrong. So we didn't do stuff, and we did stuff, and in both cases, you can, in fact, end up losing. So I want to go through and see if I can give you some small steps, easy steps, that will make sure that you do the things you're supposed to do and don't do the things you're not supposed to do. And one of my challenges is that you're all so very, very different. Let me tell you about a tallest airline pilot I ever met. He was a client for many, many years and has passed on since. But he told me the story about how he would go walking with his wife. He was retired, and probably when I first met him, he was in his early 70s. But the reason I remember his height is because he talked about how they would go walking, and on their walks they'd look for coins, and they'd actually, if they found a coin, they would pick it up. And I asked him, I said, is there any particular amount that would cause you at your height to bend all the way down and to pick up a coin? And he admitted that he would, in fact, pick up any coin. He'd walk 2 miles and pick up a penny. Well, I asked him if he would walk 5 miles to pick up a penny. No, he wouldn't do that. In fact, it turned out that in order to get him to walk 5 miles, he'd probably have to bend over and pick up a $20 bill. So we all have kind of a point that we would see something worthwhile, and then there's a point at which it sounds like, that's just too much. You're asking too much of me. So my hope is that the things I'm going to share with you now, that I'm not asking too much of you. Number one, I want you to make more money by cutting the expenses. And remember, this is not just a matter of making more money, but expenses are a cost. They are a risk. So when you cut expenses, you make more money and you take less risk. And that means you don't want to overpay on management fees. You don't want to overpay on commissions. You don't want to overpay on turnover, trading costs. And I think you know what I'm going to recommend. I'm going to recommend to do that, you invest in index funds. And the key is, that's your choice. There's nobody who says you have to do something else. Well, actually, there's nobody who says you have to do index funds either. But it's the smart thing to do because you are cutting the expenses. And number two, it makes a difference if you save more. Now, this seems like a pretty cheap way to make a better return, to save more. But people oftentimes don't sit down and make a plan about how much they're going to save. And they can save 1 or 2 or 3% more. And where it really makes the difference is if the company is matching that 401k contribution. This is something that you are in control of. So I want you to think about just saving a little bit more, and especially if there's a match involved. Now, number three, I want you to raise your equity commitment, the stock portion of your portfolio. You don't have to raise it a lot. You could go from having 50% in equity to 60% in equity. There are a lot of what they call target funds. And I think target funds are a great way to invest, but when you're 25 years old and you put your money in a target fund, they're going to have 10% of your money in bonds. And I want you to know that 10% is costing you about 0.5% a year. In other words, wherever you are right now in your equity ownership in your portfolio, if you can raise it 10% and live with that additional risk, you would then in fact make about 0.5% more per year. And as I told you a few minutes ago, 0.6%, almost the same amount, created a huge difference. Now this is going to sound a little bit crazy because in number 4, I'm going to ask you to actually take less risk. Wait a minute. First, you tell me to take more risk, and now it's in my best interest to take less risk? Yes. Because if in taking that lower, slightly lower, or whatever amount lower, you're able to stay the course, because the biggest enemy of success tends to be when people give up. They get beyond their risk tolerance, and then in that period they get beyond their risk tolerance, they go to cash, and then they have no idea how to get back in and get back on the horse to see if they can do well over the long term. So I'm suggesting that if you're very thoughtful about how much you have in fixed income, how much you have in equity, know the risk of loss with those combinations, better chance to stay the course. Now, number 5 is to add small companies to your portfolio. And what happens if you add small companies to your portfolio? Well, based on whether you look at 40 years or you look at 80 years worth of evidence, you will see that adding small cap adds about, again, small companies, what they call small cap, adds about 0.4%. Whoa, now that's a big deal. I'm happy if I can find a way to add 0.1%, but 0.4% to the return by adding small cap. Now, we can also add value. Value, those out-of-favor companies. We know the out-of-favor companies historically have had a better return than the real popular companies. And what history shows us is that you add value to the portfolio, you can add another 1.3. Now that is a huge addition to the return. And by adding the value, because value doesn't go up and down with growth, by adding that value, you actually tend to reduce the risk. Another bonus: more profits, more money, less risk. Now let's see what else we can find. What other asset class might help us make more? Well, it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but my 7th suggestion is you add internationals. Now, for a long time, internationals felt very scary, and people thought that somehow if you invested in mutual funds that owned international stocks, that there would be some sort of a coup and all your money would be gone. But people have warmed to the idea that other countries actually have very legitimate markets just like the U.S., and that by investing and placing part of your money in those international funds, not in individual companies, but funds, that again, the internationals don't go up and down with the U.S., and when you put them together, it modifies the volatility. So you have that with growth and value. In fact, you have that with small and large. And now we have this moderation of volatility with U.S. and international. But we're always, if we can, we're looking for more money along with the less risk. And in this particular case, historically, adding international can add 0.6% to the return. Now, we can differ about what do you identify as international, because a lot of people will call international a fund that has nothing but large cap growth companies. And the problem with that, all large cap growth companies, it's the same thing as all U.S. large growth companies. You don't get the value, you don't get the small cap. So I'm encouraging you to consider not just the large, big companies there, popular growth companies, but do the same thing in the international markets that you do in the U.S. Add the small international, add the value international. All steps to make you a more successful saver, to have your retirement accounts grow, to be worth more, to leave you with more to live on when you do reach retirement. Number 8, I want you to add REITs, real estate investment trusts. Now, this is something we would all understand. You may not know that term, real estate investment trust, but every time you drive by some big mall or some big office building, you're probably looking at a commercial piece of property that is owned by one of these public or private real estate investment trusts. And historically, the interesting thing is, compared to the stock market, the REITs don't go up and down with the S&P 500. Don't go up and down with small cap. Don't go up and down with international. So it's another way to hopefully make more money and modify, control that risk. Number 9, if you've got a 401k, I want you to take a good look at the investment choices that they give you. This is important because many 401k plans do not give you access to all the asset classes that you should have in your portfolio. And I went through the 50 largest 401k plans in the United States. Not one had all the asset classes available that I think you should own in your portfolio. So what you can do is you can use the 401k right up to the match. Company matches the first 3%, you put in that first 3%, get all that match, but then if you want to pick up those additional asset classes that give you higher returns, make more money, and reduce the risk, you do that inside of your IRA and your spouse's IRA. It's a very smart thing to do. And of course, number 10, you want to take advantage of all the tax-efficient investments. You want to take advantage, of course, of your IRA, your 401k, and 403b. What I'm not excited about is I don't want you buying a variable annuity as your way of trying to find a tax-efficient investment. Actually, variable annuities at the end of the day, and that's an insurance product, huge profits for the salespeople, but rarely in your best interest. But other than that variable annuity, I want you to take maximum advantage of your IRA, your 401k, etc. Now, number 11, I want you to set up your 401k so you deduct not $50 a paycheck, not a dollar amount. I want you to set it up so it's a percentage of your pay. And the reason I want it to be a percentage is because when you get a bonus, when you get a raise, I want immediately to have you saving more money. That is going to help you in the long run. Now, number 12, I hope I'm not going to make some parents upset here, but I want you to borrow money from your parents to make early contributions to your 401k or IRA. Notice the word borrow, not ask for a gift. If you could, and I know this can be done, I've helped kids do this with their parents. If you could convince your parents that you are serious about saving for the future. This is not money you're looking for a new car. And you're not going to cash out this IRA or 401k. It's there for your retirement when you're 65 or whenever you're planning to retire. And what you do is you borrow those first 5 or 10 years of contributions because you just can't make enough to do that, to have that extra money. And then at the end of that 5 or 10 year period, you pay them back. You pay them back with interest. It'll be the greatest return they ever got. Because if you look at the long-term returns that investors receive, the biggest return comes from the earliest dollars. They have the most impact. Number 13, if there is not a match in your 401k plan, or if the investment choices are bad, don't do the 401k. Use the IRA. Because in the IRA, you can have, by the way, a Roth IRA, depending on your income. And so you use the IRA, and you get access to the very best asset classes. So if you've got a crummy 401k, or if there's no match, by golly, I think you should be moving to the IRA to take advantage of the same tax deductibility, although you may choose again to use the Roth IRA, which has potentially a huge advantage when you get to retirement because you take all the money out without paying any taxes. But I want you to be smart about what's available. I want you to go where the choices are the most productive. Number 14, don't use timing. Now, timing is often called market timing. And what that means is you're going to be moving back and forth. You're going to decide when's the right time to be in the stock market and when should I be getting out of the market and moving someplace safe like a money market fund. Now, the bad news is that people who try to do this on your own, it normally ends in a disaster. Very, very few people know how to be successful timers. It is something that's even difficult for professionals. And so from everything we know about the past, you will get the best return if you simply stay the course. Remember, I want you to have the right amount of fixed income in there to make sure that you are protected during one of those periods that the market is unfriendly and going down instead of up. So I really don't want you to consider outguessing the market. And the best example of that is back in 2009. The market had been going down for over a year, and it was at the most terrible point, the most depressing, the most emotionally taxing, that people were bailing out with not just part of their money, all of their money, looking for safety. And about the time that they did that, you probably know what happened. The market turned around and doubled. And then they don't know when to get back in. It's a terrible thing to get caught in this emotional belief that you're going to outguess the market, because the market, it even befuddles the professionals. There is no evidence that even the experts can see into the future. So don't do it, please. Number 15, I want you to eliminate the play money. I have over the years sat with hundreds of people who, after I tell them what I think they should do with their money, they say, well, can't I just have some that I kind of trade the market, have some fun with? And what I have seen for many years is people who play the market end up speculating instead of investing. They end up buying things where they think they're going to get an unusually high return because otherwise it's not any fun. And most people who play with their money, it's very similar, I think, to the mentality of going to Las Vegas. That when you get there, there's a tendency to become more aggressive. And if you get ahead, you have some winnings, you now have what you will call the house's money. It's their money. You just haven't given it back to them yet. So playing with part of your portfolio, unless you know you're never going to need it, and think of all of the people, and you've probably not had your friends tell you this, but all the people who are short of money today, that if they could just have the play money back, would in fact have the money they need to live on. Number 16. Now, target funds are a wonderful, wonderful financial product. It's a mutual fund that takes care of everything for you. So if you really can't deal with the idea of picking some small and some large and some value and some growth and some international and emerging markets and REITs and bonds, they will do that for you. And it is a wonderful set it and forget it approach. Now that's the good news. There is bad news. The bad news is that target funds have very little exposure to value, very little exposure to small cap, not much exposure to international, and the international they have is almost all large, popular growth companies. So target funds for the uninitiated, for the pure amateurs, for the people who can't take that emotional challenge of dealing with the market, it's a great answer. And I think it will leave a lot of people who would otherwise have bailed out because they'll trust the professionals who are running those target funds. Because that's really what seems to make these strategies work. At the end of the day, it's about trust. Number 17, use an annuity if you're short of money. Now, I am not a great fan of annuities for people who have saved enough. Because if you've saved enough, then you should be able to invest and put your money away in a very safe and a secure way without having to go to an annuity. Because, as you probably know, an annuity makes you an offer to pay you for the rest of your life. They will take your money today and they will pay you a check every month. And if you live another 30 years, they'll pay you for 30 years. And if you die tomorrow, they say, "Thank you very much, that's our money." So if you've got great genes and you're likely to live a long time and you don't have enough money, annuities are a great way. Now, I started this telling you I was looking for ways to double your income. And the thing about annuities is that if you buy an annuity and you compare that to the income you would get from a bank for CDs, it will be twice, at least twice what you would get from the bank. So it is a legitimate way to get higher cash flow. And the older you get, of course, the less likely you are to want to take risk. And the more important regular income in your life is, an annuity can be a wonderful solution. Remember what that annuity is. It's the insurance company saying, "I promise to pay." An insurance company, not the U.S. government, an insurance company. So make sure it's a very good insurance company. And number 18, if this is a biggie, you put everything on automatic. That's the way I invest. I put my money aside automatically. I put it into certain mutual funds automatically. And when I get to retirement, it will be taken out automatically. I know step by step what I expect of myself in putting money aside, and I know step by step what I expect out of my portfolio to pay me back in retirement, all automatically. And the reason I do it that way is because I never second-guess myself. The minute we leave the world of mechanical money management or automatic money management, we are in the world of emotions, and we are at risk of doing things that are more harmful than helpful. Now, this next one is an interesting challenge. People will ask me, how much do I need to save before I can retire? Well, it depends on what kind of retirement that you want. I think that if you save enough, and we figure out what your cost of living is, and let's say it takes $500,000 in order to meet the need for $20,000 a year, 4% of the $500,000. Let's say that's what you needed. And you're 65, many years to live. And that would assume that you'd have adjustments for inflation, and so the amount you would take out would grow over time. 4%, that's it. Any more than 4%, and people in our industry would say, you're taking a risk. You're going to run out of money before you run out of life. But let me tell you how to take out 5%. It's easy. You oversave. Instead of saving $500,000, let's say you didn't retire until you had $1 million. I know that may take another 10 years. Maybe you'll get lucky, it'll take another 5 years, who knows? But it will take more time. But if you retire with more than you need, now you are not hampered with the 4% is all you can take. In fact, you could take 5%. But for one thing, you're a little older, and the money doesn't have to last as long. And secondly, you got lots of room to come down. Remember your cost of living is about $20,000. That's what you need out of the account. But at $1 million, you take out 5%, you got $50,000 because you oversaved. Now, this may be cheating in how to double the amount of money that you have in retirement to live on, but it is a choice you could make. I know a lot of people, they say, I just can't stand my job. I remember there were a couple of teachers who came in back in about 1999, came in to meet with me, and they were ready to retire. They told me with a straight face, there are 3 things we don't like: students, other teachers, and the administration. And I looked at what they had and I said, you know, you got to work 5 more years. You got to change your attitude and work 5 more years, or you are at risk of outliving your money. I had no idea that big bear market was going to start in 2000 and go down through 2002. No idea, but I did know what they had, and I did know that they didn't have enough. Well, they worked 5 more years, and I was sent a nice big basket of candy, which I really needed, and cookies and fruit and nuts as a thank you. But that's a big decision to decide when we have enough. So then we're down to the last one, number 20. Oh, this one is an easy one. It depends on you. Get an education. Get an education. There aren't very many books that you have to read. I have a handful of favorite books, but I really think that you need to take the time to get the education, to understand indexing, to understand how mutual funds work, to understand the psychology of investing, and to understand the asset allocation, how to balance your portfolio. I'll even make a recommendation to you. I think it would be well worth your time to read John Bogle's The Little Book of Common Sense Investing. I think it would be well worth your time, and pardon the title, Mutual Funds for Dummies. I think it would be absolutely worth your time to read Your Money and Your Brain by Jason Zweig. If you feel a little unsettled about money decisions, and you know some friends who seem a little wacky about money decisions, you read that book and you will get an idea of how nutty we really are around money decisions. It's a fascinating, fun read about the psychological end of money and investing your money. And of course, I hope you read mine. Now, not only is this a matter of getting the education, but I want you to go back and I want you to deal with these 20. You may say, oh, God, Paul, that's way too many. This is too much. I'm overwhelmed. Well, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to just, when you get up tomorrow morning, I want you to count the number of things you learn to do in the first hour after you get up. From turning on the coffee without burning yourself, to dressing yourself, to being able to drive to work. 20 things is nothing. You can do it. And the reason I think you will do it is because you put these 20 together, and it's not about doubling the income in retirement. I believe for many of you, it could be tripling that income, and I hope you do it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.